I expand a lot, it will turn out to be a web pen testing training. Okay. So I'll just try to kind of touch upon like what are the different ways you can do that. So one is definitely the OSI night. Okay. And actually there are multiple other different kind of scripts, like on open source scripts, what you can utilize to kind of get those data. But manually, what you can do is that you can kind of do some OSI night, or let's say you can do some passive DNS lookup, where you kind of what you do is that you don't directly do a query for, let's say, the IP address of facebook.com. What you do is that you try to find out you try to search the logs of DNS logs, okay, and try to find out in past what were the queries that were made towards facebook.com. Let's say the DNS query that were made to facebook.com. So that is one of the other way by which you can kind of figure out the IP addresses that has been allocated to facebook.com, for example. Okay. So the first thing is passive DNS and OSI. Okay. So that's the kind of easiest way. So even without generating any kind of an alert at the facebook.com site, you can kind of, what you can do is that you can kind of generate those kind of, you can collect those kind of information. Okay. So that's one of the way. I hope this also answered your question. Now, the other way, which is actually a little bit tricky, is actually called as zone transfer. Okay. So now what I will doing is I'll be trying to explain what this zone transfer, what I mean by zone transfer. Okay. So quickly give me 1 second. So what I mean by zone transfer is, let me just do that. Okay. So DNS zone transfer is actually a process that allows two DNS servers. So let's say that is DNS server 1, and let's say there is DNS server 2. Okay. So it's a process that allows two DNS server to share information about a particular domain. Okay. And why they do that? Of a particular domain. So when a zone transfer is kind of performed, let's say the primary DNS server for a domain share its database of information with secondary DNS server. Okay. So this actually allows the secondary DNS server to have a complete copy of the DNS database for that domain. Okay. So let's say, for an example, the server 1 is the primary DNS server, and server 2 is the secondary DNS server. And let's say the server 1 holds all the details about facebook.com. Okay. Like what are its IP addresses, what are its subdomains. Okay. What are its subdomains, and let's say all the other different kind of records like MX record, TXT records, and a lot of other things. Okay. So let's say there is a primary DNS server of facebook.com, and it holds the IP addresses, all the IP addresses of facebook.com, all list of all subdomains, and list of other MX and TXT record. So this is something what we are trying to kind of achieve for when we are doing any kind of DNS discovery attack. When we are doing any kind of DNS discovery attack, this is one of the main objective of us being as an attacker, to find all this kind of details for that website, for an example. So what would happen is that there will be a primary DNS server of facebook.com that will hold all this record. And what they do is that there's a term called as zone transfer. Okay, there's a term called as zone transfer. And what this zone transfer technique is let's say, and this is actually a valid technique. It is not a malicious technique. This is actually a valid technique that can be used for malicious purpose by the attacker. Okay. So what this technique is and why it is utilized is that, so it is basically used for reliability. Okay. Reliability. I hope I arrived the correct answer. Spell reliability. So what happened is that, let's say when a user from computer 1 try to get the IP address of facebook.com, let's say from the primary DNS server. So what actually happened is that, just to kind of make the architecture reliable, the DNS server actually copies the data to different other DNS servers. Okay, like let's say server 2, server 3 and all. The reason for that is, like, for example, if due to some misconfiguration, let's say this server went down. So then the C1, the users behind this computer one, can kind of get the IP address of facebook.com from other DNS server, like server 2 and server 3. So what happened is that if the owner of that website, like let's say for an example of facebook.com, has kind of planned to make their website reliable. So what they will do is that rather than having one DNS server, they'll be kind of hosting multiple DNS server. So if in that case one of that went down, the customers can get the IP address from other DNS servers like server 2 and server 3. And now how the servers how these servers will have the latest records of all these details. Okay, how they will do is that these servers, let's say at every particular, let's say at every day, or let's say at every hour, what they do is that they do a zone transfer query. To server 1. Okay, so let's say server 2 do a zone transfer query at every let's say 2 hours to server 1. So in that case, what will happen? The server 2, and all these are authorized. Okay, all these are authorized by facebook.com, for example. So the authorized DNS server can only do a the zone transfer query to the authorized server 1. Okay, in that case, what will happen is that to make the things reliable, the server 1 will send out the zone transfer request data that it has to the server 2, and similar to maybe the server 3. And just to kind of reiterate, this request can only be initiated by the authenticated servers, not by any other users. Okay, so now thing is, this is kind of something zone transfer is actually used for making the things reliable. Okay, but yeah, go on.
Sir, is this authoritative DNS servers that are making the zone transfer requests?
Yes. So server 1 is, let's say, the authoritative, the main authoritative DNS server that has all the records. And these are another kind of, let's say, the backup servers, the backup authoritative servers, okay, of facebook.com. So these backup servers, since it's authoritative, they will kind of they will be allowed to kind of make up the zone transfer request to, let's say, the server 1. Okay, so definitely it will be kind of a list of the authoritative server that can only kind of that would be kind of configured facebook.com will kind of make those kind of will be allowed to kind of make those kind of requests. So if there's any other server which is not authoritative, let's say server 4, let's say X4 for example, it won't be, if it requests that same amount of data from server 1, it won't be allowed to do that. Okay, the server 1 will not share that data with those kind of servers. Okay, so definitely it will be the authoritative DNS server. Okay, so now the thing is that this is one of the non-malicious way. This is one of the feature which is called zone transfer. Okay, by which the data is being transferred and all between about all the details about that facebook.com. And now this can be kind of utilized in a malicious way. How? So let's say one of the server, let's say one of the authoritative DNS server like S2 was not properly configured. Okay, was not properly configured. So in this case, what will happen is that, let's say this server was having some kind of vulnerability, and attacker was able to get hold of this server. Attacker got hold of server 2. Okay, in that case, now since attacker has hold of server 2, okay, attacker has hold of server 2, what the attacker can do is that they can kind of initiate a zone transfer request. Okay, request from server 1. Okay, and from there, what they will do is that they will get all of this data that was actually kind of not allowed to be kind of read by any kind of unauthenticated users. So it will get list of all IP addresses, list of all subdomains of facebook.com quickly. Okay, so that is one of the best way to kind of find out all the details of facebook.com to increase the attack surface area. Okay, and maybe it would also have certain IP addresses, like let's say one of the IP address, maybe let's say it is 5.6.7.4 for example, and let's say this is of the let's say there